Towards the end of the Clone Wars, the ghost of Qui-Gon Jinn has reached out to Master Yoda from beyond the grave. After many years, he has finally gotten strong enough to establish a full connection. As we know, this would lead Yoda on his journey to the wellspring of life, and achieving the ability to transcend the living plane and become a Force ghost. However, when Qui-Gon gave Yoda the vision of Deaba, he wanted the Grand Master to meet him there, but it came with a very stern warning: trust no one. Yoda then essentially was forced to escape the Jedi Temple and follow Qui-Gon's voice, and he had to do this while dodging his fellow council members. At this very moment is what we want to explore in today's holocron. Why did the ghost of Qui-Gon Jinn tell Yoda not to trust the Jedi High Council? Welcome back to the archives, my friends and fellow lore junkies, and let's dive in. When determining this matter, it's important not to use Qui-Gon's quote in isolation. I feel like today it's way too easy to just say the Jedi were corrupt and to move on. Qui-Gon, when he was alive, was far ahead of the curve on this matter, and he greatly distrusted the rulings of the Council more than almost any other Jedi. But Qui-Gon's defiance and his personal opinions about the Council aren't really to blame at all in this situation. When Qui-Gon became a spirit with the nether realm of the Force, he gained a bird's eye view of the galaxy and the state of the Force itself, its very will. With this new perspective, Qui-Gon gained a wisdom that transcended the bounds of his beliefs as a living Jedi. So Qui-Gon telling Yoda not to trust anyone had little to do with his personal biases in life, and everything to do with the context of the current events. At this point in time, the Jedi had traced the trail of Master Sidious to the moon of Obadiah. There, Anakin and Obi-Wan uncovered that Dooku had been the one to kill Sidious and to engineer the clone army. Through great manipulation, he had intended for the Jedi to find the clones and baited them into the war. The High Council was greatly perturbed by this and were trying to discover the meaning behind this great deception. The revelation that Dooku had wanted them to use the clone army put the Council on red alert. Everything they knew had all felt like a lie, and it didn't seem that they could trust anything. With their sight into the future already blinded by the dark side, it felt as though deception was all around them. On top of this, the Jedi were beginning to understand that Dooku was not the Sith Lord that they were looking for. Darth Sidious may not just be as mythical as they first assumed. It's during all of this that Yoda goes into his private chambers and attempts to meditate on the Force to look for insight pertaining to the clone army. And that is when Qui-Gon's voice reaches out to him from the beyond. At first, Yoda believes it to be his imagination, until Qui-Gon proves his presence by lifting up everything in Yoda's meditation chamber. Later, the High Council is having a meeting about Dooku and all their brand new revelations. In that meeting, they ask for Yoda's input, but they get very little from him. Yoda isn't engaged in these discussions, but is rather lost in thought, something none of them have ever seen before. Their Grand Master had been a champion of remaining in the moment, and at that point, all of them sensed a great deal of turmoil within Master Yoda. Mace Windu would pull Obi-Wan aside, and the two shared their concerns with one another. Obi-Wan mentioned that the war had brought all of them to their very limits, but he supposed that the Council was surprised that Master Yoda even had a limit at all. But Mace was much more concerned, and insisted that they keep an eye on the aging Jedi Master. The first thing they thought of was his mental state, that the war was causing it to deteriorate due to age or stress. But that changed when Yoda came to the Council looking for help. He told them about the voices he was hearing, but did not say it was from Qui-Gon. Yoda just needed to know if they were willing to help listen to him, and if they had heard anything from the voices as well. The Jedi Council agreed, and all of them gathered in the center of their chamber, laying hands on one another. They would spend the rest of that evening through the night, and into the next morning in deep meditation. Yet Qui-Gon Jinn refused to speak. He said nothing, not wishing for the Jedi Council to hear his voice. After this, Ki-Adi-Mundi suggested that if Master Yoda was hearing things, it was quite possibly a Sith deception. Kenobi said that it was preposterous, but Windu reminded him that all of them were very susceptible to the influences of the dark, even Grand Master Yoda. Yoda himself did not dispute this, and acknowledged that he didn't trust his own thoughts at the moment. After a medical examination, the Jedi doctor on staff suggested putting Yoda in a deprivation ritual in order to bring him as close to death as possible. That way, they could induce a deep meditation, hoping to bring him to the source of all these voices. And although it was incredibly dangerous, Yoda agrees and undergoes the deprivation ritual in a bacta tank. But as soon as he slips into the trance, Yoda finds himself in a vision of the planet of Deaba. The voice of Qui-Gon quickly tells him that what he is doing is not the right way, and that Yoda needed to venture to Deaba to find the answers directly. This is where Qui-Gon tells Yoda not to trust or even to speak to anyone. Trust no one, and come to Deaba alone. When he was finally pulled out of the tank, Yoda, still delirious from the experience, mentioned that he had spoken to the dead, old friends long gone. Later, the Jedi were communing with one another, and Mundi states that it's impossible for him to have communicated with the dead. Ki-Adi-Mundi reiterates that this was likely a Sith deception. Despite protests from others like Anakin, the rest of the council decides that it is in Yoda's best interest to have him kept under guarded watch in the hospital. And as we know from here, the Grand Master uses Anakin's help to escape to Deaba. All of this was important in determining why Qui-Gon told Yoda not to trust the council with the visions and revelations that he was receiving. The first major reason for this was because of the Jedi's dogmatic views of life, death, and the Force. You see, while the Jedi are generally more relaxed about the idea of death, they had a very solid idea of what happened. The Force gives life to all things, with the cosmic force and the living force feeding into one another in a never-ending cycle. The cosmic force gives life to the living force, and in turn the living force generates energy to feed back into the cosmic. While all beings are alive, they are connected to the living force through and receive life through the midichlorians. But when living beings die, their essence returns to the cosmic force. It's here where everything about who they were transforms into pure energy and is washed into the endless and peaceful ocean of the cosmic force. According to everything the Jedi know, retaining one's individuality after death was impossible. And while they had heard stories and records of Jedi Masters returning as ghosts, these were dismissed as myth and parables by the time of the Clone Wars. Ki-Adi-Mundi reminded them all of this principle by stating that it went against everything the Jedi knew for Yoda to have spoken directly to the dead. Qui-Gon was aware that the Council was too sure in their own understanding, too dogmatic, to fathom something other than their understanding at all. Their doctrine was so ingrained within them that they were far too rigid to entertain the idea that Qui-Gon could be trying to offer otherworldly aid. They would hold Yoda back from following and believing in him, which could doom the fate of the very Order. Not only this, but the Council's meetings were no longer about serving the Force. They did not commune with one another, nor speak of spiritual matters when in session. It was always about the war. Their minds were consumed by it. Everything new was a potential threat to them, so if Qui-Gon had tried to present himself to the High Council, they would immediately think that it was Sith deception. And in fact, this is exactly what Mundi and Mace Windu began to assume, so Qui-Gon was ultimately correct to hold back. Had Yoda tried to tell them about Qui-Gon, they would have held him back and accused him of falling under the influence of the dark side. And so Jinn's ghost entrusted Yoda to say nothing and to trust no one, not even those that may have believed him like Anakin. In that very same episode, Anakin would actually hear Qui-Gon's voice from beyond, speaking Yoda's name. Anakin thought it was a trick of his mind, and went to the Grand Master in the Temple Gardens. Anakin here even states that he never saw Qui-Gon at all. Anakin's experience of seeing his ghost on Mortis, but they were shown that even Anakin was brought into the idea that he wasn't sure that it was Qui-Gon. Obi-Wan had come up with the explanation that the powers of the world had toyed with their memories, which is what created the images of Qui-Gon. Unable to find any other explanation, Anakin had accepted this. After all, the image of his mother had been a lie too, because it had been the sun in disguise. But when Yoda realized this, he shut down and refused to speak with Anakin about the matter any further. This is why Qui-Gon mentioned that no one could be trusted. Not the Council, not even Obi-Wan or Anakin. All of them were too rigid, warped by the war. Yoda was the one that Qui-Gon needed the most. After emerging from the Bacta tank, Yoda had a brand new mindset. He was already being changed by the experience of letting go of the old dogmatic ways of the Jedi. This is where Yoda's transformation begins. Yoda had been just as rigid as the rest of them, which was why Qui-Gon could not speak to him. But as the years went on, Yoda began to see the truth of Qui-Gon's words. He saw the problems with the Jedi, as well as the Republic, and realized that trying to fix them would be too little too late. And once he finally spoke with Qui-Gon, Yoda understood and saw through the cage that the Jedi had placed on themselves. When he was escaping, he told Anakin, "All around us, the cage may already be." As Yoda went to Dagobah and the wellspring of life, Yoda's mind would be opened more and more until he finally defeated the fear of the dark side that he kept within himself. Over the course of the journey, he would see visions that would inform him of the dark times that lay ahead. He couldn't be certain that the Jedi were going to be destroyed, but Yoda did know that Sidious was real and was emerging from the shadows soon. It may even come to pass that he himself could die, but learning how to retain his identity after death, to reach out to the living, would be a hope of the Jedi Order that would continue on, a hope that would keep the Jedi alive. The future to Yoda was uncertain, which was why Yoda did not warn the Council about their path of destruction. He honestly didn't have a clue where it was leading, or if even he would survive. But now Yoda had a way of safeguarding against all possibilities, even safeguarding against death itself, because of Qui-Gon Jinn. But that could never have happened if he had not listened to Qui-Gon and distrusted the entirety of the High Council. So what do you think of this, guys? Had you wonder why Yoda didn't tell the rest of the High Council about Qui-Gon's ghost and his brand new knowledge? I hope this answered a few questions for you, as I personally was confused for a long time why Yoda did not warn the rest of the High Council about their imminent destruction, a destruction that he himself witnessed. Along these same lines, if there are other confusing parts of the lore that you would like us to dissect and analyze, be sure to leave them in the comments down below. As always, my friends and fellow lore junkies, thank you so much for visiting us here at the archives today, and as always, may the Force be with you.